Haven's POV.
Once we had everything we needed, Wesley paid for it all, including the swimsuit I had on under my clothes from earlier, and we made our way onto the sand. He had a giant bag filled with all kinds of supplies, including sunscreen and several very large beach towels, and I had my purse and a straw sun hat I had found right as he was paying for everything. I waffled on it, trying it on in front of the mirror it had been hanging near, and when Wes saw me in it, he pointed at me and said, "Also ring me up for her hat." Between the time he had left me in my fitting room and I'd met him at the register, he'd changed into his own new swimsuit and a pair of flip-flops, which he kicked off of his feet when we reached the sand. I paused at the spot where the cement ended and the sand began, and took a deep breath to prepare myself for this momentous occasion. Wesley paused his steps to turn and look at me, heaving the bag further up onto his shoulder. I kicked off my Birks and bent to pick them up, but Wesley already had them in his hands, having crossed back over to me to grab them. He took my hand, and I stepped over the line, then stopped again, savoring the feel of the warm, coarse sand beneath my feet and between my toes. But before I could fully absorb the moment, I had to hop between one foot and the other. "Shit, it's hot!" I shrieked, and Wesley laughed. "Well, yeah, it's been under the sun for a good chunk of the day. You could have warned me." "I didn't think you'd try to just stand in it," he chuckled as he started walking, and I followed him. "Come on, the sand closer to the water is cooler." He led us to a spot closer to the water, and just as he said, the sand here was cooler. He set out some of the towels he'd purchased, then set the bag and some of the other heavier items on the corners so the wind wouldn't blow the towels around. I glanced around us as I removed my hat and got ready to take my shorts and t-shirt off. The beach itself was surprisingly empty of people, considering how many were in town while we ate and shopped. I guess that was a good thing, though, since Wes had threatened eyeball ripping. I was just about to pull my shirt over my head when Wesley did just that, revealing his bare torso to me for the first time. I stopped everything, my hands frozen on the hem of my shirt, and just looked at him. I was not prepared for the Greek god who stood in front of me. I mean, I had dreamed of what he might look like under his clothes, based on what I had felt under my hands when we kissed, but my imaginings didn't even come close to reality. My eyes started at his chest, where there was a small smattering of chest hair between his chiseled pecs. Then my gaze traveled down to his washboard abs, where more hair trailed beneath the waistband of his swim trunks, slung low across his hips. He had those lines on either side of his lower abs, those defined muscle dips I'd only ever seen on movie stars or male models or bodybuilders. I didn't even know what they were called. But they made a V, and along with that hair that disappeared beneath his shorts, I knew they pointed down towards his Haven. He rumbled out, his brow raised slightly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I practically panted, my eyes snapping back up to his face. "Fine." I ripped my shirt over my head to hide my blushing face, my hands moving to my shorts as soon as my shirt hit the towel, my face looking down so he wouldn't see my very pink cheeks. Despite that, I could still feel his eyes boring into me, watching me, waiting for me to finish undressing and look back at him. I feigned an air of confidence as I slid my shorts down my pale legs and stepped out of them to walk to Wesley's end of the towels, where the sunscreen was. I plopped down on the towel, grabbed it out of the bag, and began to apply it to my arms and legs and chest and stomach, avoiding looking at Wes the entire time. Fingertips tickled my skin, and the end of the braid I'd done while in the fitting room appeared over my shoulder. I angled my head to the side just as Wesley reached for the sunscreen and squirted some into his palm. "Let me get your back for you," he said, rubbing his hands together. I closed my eyes as his hands touched my back, slowly and gently massaging the sunscreen into my skin. My teeth sunk into my lip as I held back from making any noises or releasing any incriminating sighs while his hands explored my bare back. He started at my shoulders, then worked his way down, taking care to ensure every inch of my ivory skin was protected from the blazing sun. Despite his large, calloused hands, his touch was soft and careful, with just the right amount of pressure to rub the lotion into my skin. After he'd finished my lower back, his hands stopped in the smallest part of my waist, his thumbs tracing little swirls and circles into my skin. It was a small, familiar touch that sent warmth through my body to my heart. I let out the sigh I'd been holding back, and leaned back a little into his touch. He leaned forward and kissed the top of my shoulder, inhaling deeply, then said, "Let's go swimming." He stood up, reaching for my hand, but I shook my head and pointed at the towel in front of me. You need sunscreen too. I don't sunburn, he shrugged. But you can still get skin cancer without ever getting sunburned. He grimaced and rubbed the back of his neck, then nodded. Right. You're right, he said, sitting himself down on the towel in front of me with his knees up and his arms resting on them. I had to sit all the way up on my knees to reach his shoulders, but after I put the sunscreen in my hands, I mimicked his method, starting at his shoulders and neck and working my way down his back to the waistband of his swim trunks. It had been tough enough to hold in my sounds and hold back my thoughts when it was his hands on me. But now that I was actually exploring his bare skin for the first time, actually getting an up-close and personal look at what lay under his clothes, actually feeling the power of his muscles, it was even more difficult. The intentional in and out rhythm of breathing I felt and heard coming from him told me I wasn't the only one of us affected by this situation, and while it turned me on and made my heart beat faster, it also put my mind at ease to know it wasn't all one-sided. That I wasn't the only one of us who was fighting a losing battle. The only question was, which of us would give in first? Finished, I breathed out, wiping my hands on my thighs to get rid of the excess sunscreen. Great! Wes exclaimed, jumping up to his feet in one smooth motion. He hopped back and forth between his feet, his excitement bubbling up and out of him like a puppy. I don't know if it was his nostalgia at being somewhere he'd come a lot growing up, or if it was because it was my first time at the beach at all, but his enthusiasm was adorable and contagious. Let's race, he said as I got to my feet. You'll win, I pointed out with an eye roll. You don't know that. Wesley, if I win, it would only be because you let me. He mused. Fair point. Come on. With that, he turned and started running towards the water. Wes! I yelled, taking off after him, my feet fumbling awkwardly through the thick sand. He somehow made it look so easy. Even though he had to be at least twice my weight, he floated over the top of the sand as if he weighed nothing. Wesley! I yelled again, laughing at my dismal attempts to run. He turned and ran backwards a few steps, then when he saw I was struggling, he stopped running and waited, allowing me to slow to a walk. Maybe Twinkle Toes isn't a good nickname for you, he said as I reached him. Maybe I should call you. I raised a brow at him and he stopped and just smiled at me. Kidding. Kidding. Twinkle Toes is perfect, he added with a nod, bending down and kissing the tip of my nose. After you. He gestured towards the water, which we were only a few steps away from. I moved the last few steps forward, to where I could see where the waves had been only moments before, and I stood there, waiting for the water to come and splash around my feet. I watched as the next wave came closer and closer, white sea foam bubbling at the front of it. It was beautiful and looked just how I'd imagined. What I didn't expect, though, was the temperature. Fuck me, that is cold, I said, jumping back several steps to the safety of the hot sand. I stared out at the ocean, at the crashing waves and the handful of people surfing, and decided that even though I was thrilled to be there, I didn't need to go in the ocean to enjoy the spontaneous beach day. Nope. No thanks. I'm good, I declared, then turned to walk back to our towels. I only made it 2 steps before Wesley's arms grabbed me around my middle, pulling me back into his body and tossing me over his shoulder. My head hung down over his back, and his hands gripped my thighs to keep me in place. I ignored the somewhat intimate touch, though, and the rather delightful view of his perfect ass, because of what his intentions were. Wes! I shrieked as he marched us towards the water. What are you doing? We're going swimming, he stated. But it's freezing. I'll keep you warm, he rumbled, pausing in knee-deep water. No! I repeated, shaking my head adamantly as he started moving through the water again. No. 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 Haven, he soothed, stopping again when he was about waist-deep. I pushed my torso up with my hands, moving my body and wrapping my legs around Wesley's waist as his grip on me loosened and he tried to lower me into the water. My arms clung to his neck like a motherfucking koala, and he chuckled, wrapping his own arms around my waist and rubbing my back. Can you swim? He asked softly. Yes, I grumbled. Okay, he murmured, his hands still caressing my back. Then just take your time. I don't mind staying like this, he said into my ear, placing a small kiss right next to it. It's like Arctic temperatures in there. How are you not freezing? It's not that cold, he chuckled. And I run pretty warm. Yes, I did notice that, I told him, pulling myself tighter against his body so my skin could soak in more warmth from his. So, then, you can just stay close to me in the water, and I'll keep you nice and warm, he said, his palms splaying out across my bare back and pressing me somehow even closer to him. I hummed, my eyes shutting in contentment at our closeness. His nose trailed down my face to my neck, nuzzling into it and then kissing it. The feather-light touch sent a little shiver through my body, all the way to my toes, and I didn't even try to hide it from him. If he wasn't aware of the effect he had on my body by this point, well, then he was denser than I thought. I swallowed back some of my nerves and started to unwrap my legs from his waist when I had another thought and instead tightened them. What about sharks? Trust me, twinkle toes, you don't need to worry about sharks, he said with a laugh. Why? Did you put on shark repellent or something? No, they're frightened of short ballerinas with red hair. I snapped my head backwards and stared at him with my jaw dropped. Wesley! I exclaimed, smacking his chest with the back of my hand as he let out a loud, deep laugh, his head falling backwards. I'm not that short. His laughter continued as he lifted his head to look at me again. He pursed his lips to hold it in, his whole body shaking from the effort. Seriously, though, you don't have to worry about sharks, he finally managed to say. They prefer warmer water. I don't blame them, I grumbled under my breath. Just trust me, Haven. I promise I will keep you safe. I took in several deep breaths, breathing in Wesley's smoky, spicy, yet sweet cologne. His hands on my back kept rubbing and stroking and caressing me, the calluses and his touch both sending little tingles all over my body. His scent and his touch grounded me, reminding me he was right there, that he wasn't going anywhere, that I was safe when I was with him. And even though I was nervous, and the water was frigid, this was something I'd wanted to do for a long time, swim in the ocean. Ever since we started writing to each other 12 years ago, I dreamed of coming to California and going to the beach and swimming in the deep blue waters. I would not let the temperature prevent me from living that dream. With one last deep breath, I unwrapped my body from Wesley's and turned and hopped down into the water, ripping the bandage off and just taking the plunge instead of trying to ease into it. I shrieked as the water hit my navel and wrapped my arms around myself to trap any warmth from escaping. Wesley's arms also came back around me, his broad, warm chest pressing into my back. His hands rubbed my upper arms, and he tapped his chin over my shoulder. I leaned back against him, not even bothering to pretend like I wasn't trying to steal his body heat. Like he could read my mind, or maybe because he could see the goosebumps on my skin, he pulled me in closer to him, tightening those stupidly powerful arms and trapping me within their circle. Not that I cared. There was no use denying how much I wanted him. How much I wanted him to own me, body and soul. On the drive-in, I thought I wasn't ready to give him all of my heart. But standing there with him embracing me in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I realized how much of a lie that was. I couldn't give him my heart at all. Not even piece by piece, because he already had it in its entirety.
Wesley's POV.
Our beach day flew by. Once Haven adjusted to the temperature of the water, she was more than happy to splash around in the water without me holding her, much to the chagrin of my Leakin. His whimpering and whining after she left the safety of our arms was so insistent it gave me a headache. He kept bugging me to go grab her and keep her close. He was getting attached, she had him wrapped around her finger, and she didn't even know it. But the pure joy on her face as she experienced the ocean for the first time, well, it forced me to keep my distance and let her just enjoy herself. Seeing her smile like that was worth not having her in my arms for a moment. However, my Leakin was thrilled when she said she'd had enough of the water and wanted to soak up some sunshine on our towels. She read a magazine she'd picked out at the store, and I worked on some Sudoku puzzles, our comfortable silence interspersed with light conversation. I realized how easy it was to just be with her. I didn't feel the need to fill the silence with pointless conversation. I could just sit there, on my towel, with her at my side, content and at ease. I glanced over at her again. She lay on her stomach, her arms crossed under her head, propping her up, and one of the extra towels over her like a blanket to protect her from the sun. And she was snoring. Just barely, and not with every breath. Nevertheless, she was definitely snoring.
Hey!
I said, closing my puzzle book and rubbing her shoulder. She jerked herself awake, her big blue eyes blinking against the sunlight as she lifted her head to look at me. Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep again, she muttered. She pushed her torso up to move into a seated position, and I had to look back down at my puzzle book for a moment. Her breasts were smaller than most of the she-wolves I was used to, but with the way her upper arms squeezed them together, and with the style of her swimsuit top and the way her back arched as she moved on the towel, I knew I would have a hard time holding back myself and my leaking. It's fine, I grunted. I know you're exhausted from your shows and stuff, I added, trying to smooth out my voice. Did you want to eat and then go clean up, or rinse off first and then go eat? Rinse off first. Definitely, she said, brushing sand off of herself as she stood up. Once Haven had put her cardigan on over her swimsuit, and I had packed up the rest of our things, we made our way back to the campground to clean up before heading to the pier for dinner. I, and my leakin, would have preferred if she'd covered up more, but since her shorts and t-shirt were the only other clothing she had with her, we had to make peace with it. I had offered to buy her another outfit. Shit, I'd have bought her the entire store if she wanted it. But she was just as stubborn as me and insisted she was fine with the one outfit since we would head home the next morning. Little did she know I bought her a new outfit, anyway. When we got back to the campsite, I showed her how to use the coin-operated hot water showers, and then once she had rinsed herself off, I let her change in the privacy the tent provided her while I rinsed myself off and then changed in the bathroom. I felt a little guilty that I couldn't let her take a proper shower, that I hadn't taken her to a hotel or a rental house, but I'd really wanted her to experience exactly what I had loved doing when growing up. So, clam chowder or fish and chips? I asked her as I walked up to the tent at the same time she walked out through the tent flaps. I reached my hand out to take hers, but she bypassed it and walked straight up to me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her chin on my chest. Without a pause, I cupped her face with my hands and bent to kiss her, keeping the kiss light while still conveying how much she meant to me. "Thank you for bringing me here," she whispered as I pulled back. "You didn't have to do this." My thumb stroked her cheeks, and I smiled at her while shaking my head. She didn't understand just yet, but she would soon. She would know what it meant to have everything, to always be taken care of, and to be treated like the gift she was. "I wanted to, though," I told her. "I know," she replied. "That's what makes you, you." "I'm glad you're finally catching on," I chuckled, wrapping my arms around her shoulders and kissing her nose just as her stomach rumbled. "Now let's get some food in that belly of yours. I swear it's about to jump out of your body and attack me if I don't feed it soon." I led her to the pier, pointing out various important landmarks. Well, important to me. To everyone else, they were likely just normal landmarks. Or not even landmarks at all. Over there is the skate park Reed and Seb lived at one summer, until they crashed into each other and Reed broke his collarbone and Sebastian got a concussion. Dad didn't let them go back again after that. I don't blame him. That sounds awful. They were both healed and back on their feet pretty quickly, but I stopped, realizing what I had just said. I mean, as quickly as someone can heal after those types of injuries, I added, hoping my lie was good enough. I knew humans took longer to heal than we did, but I had no idea what was a normal amount of time for a broken collarbone or a concussion to heal. Thankfully, Haven didn't seem to notice my awkward cover. "That fire pit was our fire pit," I told her. "We'd set up an enormous bonfire there on our last night here, and my mom and Fiona and Stephanie, when she was alive, would help us all make s'mores while our dad surfed." "At night?" "Yeah, they're kind of crazy like that," I laughed. "My dad says the surf is better under the moonlight." "Is he right?" Haven asked. I shrugged. "I don't know. I'm not really into surfing. Not like Reed is. Hell, if he could, he'd move out here instead of staying in Crescent Lake." "Why doesn't he?" "He doesn't want to leave his dad alone." She nodded in understanding. "How old was he when his mom died?" 9, I told her, rubbing her hand with my thumb, realizing that was the age she'd been when Jack fell ill and social services removed her from their home. Was she sick? An accident, I muttered, looking back over at the old fire pit. It was the only thing I could think of to tell her that made sense. I couldn't tell her Stephanie had died while defending the pack from rogues during an attack. She'd been one of our best warriors, so she'd been one of the first to jump into the fray for every attack we had that year when we had a major problem with rogues in the area. She nodded again as I looked back at her. So, why that specific fire pit? She asked, changing the subject a bit. Well, it was an equal distance from it to that playground, that volleyball net, and the water, I said, pointing to each location as I mentioned it. The playground for Maddie, obviously, since she is so much younger than the rest of us, the volleyball court for us, and the water for everyone. Sounds like you have a lot of fond memories of this place, she murmured as we walked onto the pier, the echoing of our footsteps on the boards almost drowning out her voice. I nodded, enjoying the sound of the water under our feet as it echoed against the pier, and savoring the smell of the sea air. I do, I confirmed, pulling her into my side and wrapping my arm around her shoulders. And now I have some new memories to add to them. Goddess damn it, cheesy Wes had struck again. I groaned internally, but the smile on her face told me I'd said the right thing. We reached the restaurant on the pier and ordered our food after a brief wait in line, then took it to the railing, where we ate and continued talking. So, how did you end up with Maya as your roommate? I asked her. Peter made a social media group for the company members and other employees and added us to it as they hired us. I made a post asking if anyone was looking for a roommate because I couldn't afford the rent on an apartment by myself, even a studio, and Maya was the only one who responded. Of course she was, I chuckled. Haven laughed as well. I know. She told me later she didn't even need a roommate for financial reasons, but she'd never lived alone and was hating it, and it had only been a week or so when I made my post. My lips twitched, and I nodded. Of course, she hated living alone. She was a werewolf. We lived in packs. It was part of our basic nature to want others around us almost all the time. Plus, she'd grown up with a twin, meaning she was really used to having someone around all the time. Maybe fate had a hand in it, too? I asked. It was just coincidence, Wes, she said with a shake of her head as she finished her fish and chips. Was it, though? I grabbed her trash and mine and tossed it in the trash can. I mean, I still can't believe you didn't even realize you were that close to where I live. Honestly, I was just so glad to leave Salt Lake, to be truly independent, that I jumped at the first job offer I received that was far away. I didn't even do any research other than plane ticket costs. She shrugged as I came back to her side and tucked her body under my arm. I think if I knew it was near you, I actually would have turned it down, she confessed. I breathed out a sigh and pulled her closer, pressing my nose into her hair. I'm glad I didn't, though, she added, leaning her body into mine. I'm glad I came to California. I am too, I murmured against her head. I wrapped my other arm around her and kissed the top of her head as she stared out at the ocean and the sun setting on the horizon. The breeze from the water swirled around us, whipping some loose strands of her braid into the air. Her natural scent of jasmine mixed with the lingering scent of sunscreen and the salt of the sea on her skin and created a heady, intoxicating perfume that my leaking kept making me inhale. He rolled around on his back in my mind, like a cat who had just sniffed catnip. And I was just as affected by it as he was. It was addicting. I wanted to roll around in it too, wanted to embed it into my skin and my clothing so I could breathe her in whenever I wanted. I wanted to be selfish and hide her away, so I didn't have to share her scent with anyone else. I didn't bother trying to calm myself and my leaking and my growing desire for her. There was no use denying it, no use fighting it, no use hiding it from her. She knew how I felt about her. Or at least I hoped she did. My hand traveled up to her neck, leaving little goosebumps on her skin and making her breath hitch. I tilted her chin until her head was angled perfectly for my lips to kiss hers, our eyes locking for a moment before our mouths touched. Just like at her apartment the night of our date, there was so much unsaid in that one look we shared. That night, it was us admitting that there was a connection, that there was something there, a spark or a tiny flame, that we wanted to explore and bring to life. But this look, the one we shared on the pier, was so much more. It was the recognition of something deeper. It was the undeniable truth, an agreement that what we felt wasn't something small anymore. Her blue eyes sparkled and her red hair burned against the backdrop of the sunset, taking my breath away and setting my heart aflame. I lowered my mouth to hers, and her answering kiss was the response to the question I didn't even need to ask. Our lips moved in perfect sync, twisting and pouting and teasing without pause. Her body melted against mine, and I held her there, reveling in the feel of her soft lines meeting the hard, muscular planes of my chest. Our hearts beat in unison, sending ripples of anticipation through me. She broke away first, catching her breath, her eyelids fluttering. Kissing on the beach at sunset? Kind of cliché, don't you think? She asked in a whisper. I dipped my head and nipped at her earlobe. Hush, sugar plum, you're ruining the moment, I chastised. Nothing could ruin this moment, she replied, her voice almost undetectable under the wind and the waves and the footsteps of tourists on the pier. In fact, had I not been a leakin, I doubt I would have heard her at all. And as I held onto her under the setting sun and my lips moved back to hers, I found myself agreeing with her. Because it was at that moment that I realized I was in love with Haven Kenway.
Wesley's POV.
At some point between the kiss at the pier and us getting ready to settle into sleep for the night, I realized that spending the night in a tent with Haven was actually a truly terrible idea. Especially once I found out there was only one sleeping bag in my truck. I didn't know if Seb removed the other one that I could have sworn was in there, or if there was in fact only one in there in the first place, but that didn't really matter. What mattered was that there was only one, and there were two of us. Well, it actually didn't matter. I could easily sleep without the bag, the temperature wasn't cold enough to affect me. But I had to keep up pretenses, and that meant acting as though I needed a sleeping bag. As I came back into the tent with our bag of extra clothes, the camping pad, and the one sleeping bag and pillow, the second reason it was a bad idea reared its ugly head at me in the form of Haven's words. I don't have anything to wear to sleep in, she muttered as I put the pad and pillow on the floor, her cheeks turning pink. I stopped my movements and stared at her, my throat closing up. What was she trying to imply? Was she saying she was going to sleep naked? Images of just that flashed in my mind's eye, too fast to catch a clear picture of, but each snippet enough to feed the growing desire in my soul. And my pants. What? I stammered, shaking my head to clear my thoughts. I don't have any pajamas, she said with a nervous laugh. Pajamas. Right. I mumbled, mentally smacking myself on the forehead. Of course, she didn't mean she wanted to sleep naked. I fumbled around in the bag of extra clothes, keeping her new outfit hidden from her because I didn't want to get yelled at yet, and grabbed her one of my old t-shirts. Here, I mumbled, holding it out to her. You can sleep in this. Thanks, she murmured, taking it from me and brushing my fingers with hers. That one touch almost sent me to my knees and had me clenching my jaw and my fists as I tossed the bag on the floor of the tent and turned to give her some privacy to change. Goddess damn it, I was acting like a bumbling teenaged virgin instead of the experienced, confident alpha I was. I don't know what it was about her that made me that way, but she turned me into a helpless puddle without even trying. The soft rustling sounds of her changing filled the tent, and I yanked my shirt off, dropping it on top of the bag before unbuckling my belt and removing my jeans. I stood with my hands on my hips, breathing deeply, trying to control my thoughts, deciding whether to slip on my gym shorts or just stay in my boxers. But the only thing that deep breathing did was fill my lungs with Haven's jasmine and fruit scent mixed with the light musk of her arousal. My dick had been semi-hard pretty much all day, and the fragrance coming from her side of the tent did nothing to ease the tension in my pants. I lifted my fist to my mouth and bit my knuckles to keep the groan and that was threatening to spill out of me. I wanted her. Are you done changing? I ground out, my hand moving to my hair, my eyes closing as I tried to hold my breath. Yeah, she breathed out. I took a moment to prepare myself before I turned to face her. I knew seeing her in my clothes would light a fire in me, and there was a chance it would bring my leaking forward, so I needed to be ready. I turned my head first, looking at her over my shoulder. She'd taken her braid out so her hair fell in damp, loose waves over her shoulders, and my old, gray Stanford t-shirt came to her mid-thighs, leaving the rest of her long, smooth dancer legs on display. I let my eyes skate over her body, searing the image of her in my clothes into my brain. My Leakin didn't know whether to purr, pant, growl, run around in circles, or roll around on his back at the sight in front of him. So he was in my head doing a weird dance of all five. Her eyes did the same once over on my body, a long, slow drag of her gaze as she drank in almost all of me. The heat and desire in her eyes when she met mine brought my dick to full attention. Fuck, I wanted her. I grabbed the sleeping bag from the mat to cover my dick as I faced her fully and started babbling. So, bad news, unfortunately. I thought there was another sleeping bag in the back of my truck, but it turns out there was only one. I think Seb or Reed might have stolen it the last time they went on a hike or something. I don't know. I swear, though, I didn't know there was only one. I really thought there I had two. If I had known, I would have gone home for another one or stopped somewhere and bought you one, but I sighed and looked up at the ceiling of the tent. Yep. Bumbling idiot. So, long story short, there is only one sleeping bag, I finally said. She shook her head at me and grabbed the sleeping bag from me, unrolling it and unzipping it to lay it out on the thin camping pad on the floor. Wes, she laughed, as she got on her knees and started spreading the sleeping bag out like a comforter. Wesley, you didn't have to pretend to bring only one sleeping bag. If you wanted to snuggle me, all you had to do was ask, she said, peering up at me from the pad, her blue eyes wide and sparkling. I crouched down to her level, helping her spread the bag out. The horny, anxious beast in my head paced back and forth as he watched me. He wanted to push forward and help me, but I held him back. I didn't need his help. I would do this my way. I reached out for her cheek once we had everything settled, and I said, "Sugar plum, will you snuggle?" Her lips were on mine before I could even finish the question, her arms moving around my neck to pull her body closer. My hands grabbed her hips, lifting her so I could maneuver us down to the pad. Her legs wrapped around my waist, pressing her core against me and letting me feel through her underwear how warm and wet and ready she already was for me. I held onto her with one arm around her middle while the other balanced me as I lowered her to the pad, my hips settling between her thighs and my rock-solid cock pressing into her warm center, showing her how I wanted her just as much as she wanted me. A moan left her mouth, and my own answered it as she writhed under me, pressing her pussy harder against my dick. My shirt on her body had ridden up around her hips, exposing her navy blue underwear to my eyes as I tore my lips from hers to gaze down at her as she lay beneath me. Her cheeks were flushed with desire, and her red curls were spread out on the pillow behind her. Her chest rose and fell with her breathing, and her scent filled the tent, feeding the desire in my soul. She was so exquisite, so breathtaking. She was everything I never knew I needed, and I couldn't picture my life without her in it. I gripped her hip, squeezing it as her hands moved from my neck to my collarbone and my chest. Her smooth, cool fingertips played with the smattering of chest hair on my torso and made goosebumps appear on my warm skin. My hips pressed harder into hers, and I tilted my head up towards the ceiling, my throat tight as her hands continued to caress my body, her touch cool but somehow leaving warmth in its wake. Fuck. I wanted her. I lowered myself to my elbows, my body hovering just above hers, and my lips met hers again, my tongue pushing through the seam of her lips into her mouth. She rewarded me with another sweet little moan as our tongues tangled together and I savored the taste of her mouth and the sounds of her pleasure. "Wesley," she groaned, panting as my mouth moved to her neck. Her hands clutched at my back, her nails digging into my skin. She arched up into me, pressing her small breasts against my chest, and through the fabric of my shirt on her body, I could feel her hard little nipples. It took everything in me to hold back my Leakin, to not slice down the center of the shirt with my claw and reveal her naked torso to my eyes. It took every ounce of restraint I had in me to pull away from her, and it was physically painful for me to open my mouth and say my next words to her. But I had to. I didn't want our first time together to be like this. I didn't think I could hold myself back from taking her the way my Leakin craved, to be dominant and possessive, to claim her as our equal and our mate. Our Luna. Haven. Wait. I gritted out between my teeth, rising up to my knees so our bodies no longer touched. She whimpered as I pulled away, and it made my leaking growl and gnash his teeth at me in my head, made it harder for me to say what I needed to say. Sugar Plum, I grunted, I want you. I want you so fucking much, I told her. Then take me, Wes. She murmured. I want this too. I'm yours. Goddess fucking damn it, she had no fucking idea what those words meant, what they did to the primal side of me, what they ignited in my leaking. She sat up and reached for the hem of the shirt on her body, but I grabbed her hands and lifted them above her head, pressing her back down against the camping pad and pinning her there. Bad idea. Because now my leaking was really trying to surge forward, and I had to close my eyes and clench my teeth again. Please, Wesley. She begged, squirming underneath me, trying to create friction between our bodies. My eyes snapped open to find hers boring into me, hooded and filled with need. We stared at each other, neither of us blinking or moving aside from the rise and fall of our chests as we worked to catch our breath. I wanted her. I wanted her. I fucking wanted her. But not like this. Not when I could barely control my leaking. Not in my old tent on the hard ground of a campsite. And not when she didn't even know the truth of what I was. Not like this. I muttered, shaking my head. You deserve more than this. You deserve candlelight and romance. You deserve better than hard and fast on the floor of my tent. I just want real in you. She replied. I don't need special. Haven, I sighed, pressing my forehead to hers. I couldn't even fully explain to her why I couldn't just fuck her senseless. I couldn't tell her it was because if I let myself have her, I wasn't sure I would be able to stop my leaking from claiming her, from marking her. The whole day had been foreplay, one moment after the next building us up, until we were ready to burst, and my leaking wanted to take what was his, mark her as his. Haven, please. Just let me do this the way I want. I opened my eyes and pulled back from her a little, and she pulled her lips into her mouth and then nodded, and said, okay, in a very quiet voice. The disappointment in her voice and her eyes left a bitter flavor in my mouth, and as she tried to pull her arms away from my hands, I smirked. She needed a release. That much was clear. I could feel it and smell it and practically taste it, and damn it, I was going to give it to her. It wouldn't be exactly what either of us wanted, but it would ease that tension and cool the fire between us. At least for a little while. Not so fast, Sugar Plum. I growled, dipping my head down to her neck. Just because I'm not going to fuck you, doesn't mean I'm not going to make you feel good, I said, placing a kiss right above the collar of the t-shirt. Her whole body shuddered, and I smiled against her skin. I lifted myself up, and ran my hands along her body from her arms and down her sides to her hips, my palms stroking the side of her breasts through the shirt. Her back arched, but she kept her hands up by her head, her eyes on my face, watching me as I watched her. My leaking urged me to just rip the flimsy fabric of her underwear that separated me from her pussy, but I knew she didn't have more with her. So instead, I dragged them over her hips and down her legs, tossing them somewhere behind me as I revealed her lower half to my eyes. My dick twitched in my boxers at the sight in front of me. There was something extra provocative at seeing only her pussy and legs exposed to me, at the rest of her still being covered. Even so, I could see her little hard as diamonds nipples poking against the cotton t-shirt. She didn't shy away from my hungry gaze or try to cover herself or close her thighs. No, she fucking spread her legs further, giving me the perfect view of all of her. That was the last link on the chain holding me back. I swallowed back my growl as I dove forward, laying on my stomach between her legs, my head at the apex of her thighs. I took one deep inhale of her sweet scent, then I put my mouth on her, finally tasting her for the first time. And oh, what a taste it was. One kiss was enough to ruin me. There was no turning back. She was it for me. Her hands flew down to weave into the short strands of my hair, and she cried out, "Oh, Wesley." I hummed my approval as I continued my exploration of her. My tongue tasted every inch of her, licking up every drop that spilled from her. Her little whimpers and moans were just how I imagined, and yet somehow even better in real life. Each one encouraged me to continue, each one drove me wild with need. Not the just need to have her, but the need to give her what she wanted. The need to bring her over the edge and watch her fall apart. My hands came up near my face. One of them held her thigh even more out of the way, and the other joined my mouth and played with her, teasing more of those sexy sounds from her body. I slid one finger inside her with ease, and her hips jerked at the full feeling. My lips twitched with a laugh, but I didn't stop, and her bucking hips slowly switched to smooth, rolling movements as she chased her orgasm. I knew she was getting close as her walls tightened around my finger, and I turned my palm up, finding and stroking that special spot in her pussy. "Wes," she moaned, and her hands moved away from my hair, her body tensing as she reached the precipice of bliss. My thumb patted over her clit, and I lifted my eyes to watch her as she shattered, while still keeping my mouth on her entrance, and I was rewarded with the most beautiful sight. Her hands squeezed her breasts through her shirt, pulling and twisting her nipples, and her body writhed without restraint. She came hard, with my name on her lips and my hands and mouth on her body. I growled against her pussy as her release spilled out, not caring to hold the sound back from her. I touched and kissed her through each wave of her orgasm, keeping my kisses tender and gentle until I was sure she was finished. I crawled back up her body as she caught her breath, hovering over her again and soaking in the relaxed, pleased expression on her features. I lowered my mouth to hers and gave her a sweet kiss, keeping it light and tender and not deepening it. Then I rolled onto my side, pulling her little body into mine and wrapping her up tight in my arms, my nose burying into the top of her hair as I inhaled her scent that was beginning to mix with mine. She nuzzled into my chest sleepily, her arms wrapping around me too and hugging me as tight as she could. She was out in minutes, and I knew I would follow her soon. I was hard as steel in my boxers, but unlike with my previous encounters with other females, I didn't care about getting mine too. All that mattered was her and her pleasure, and that I had been the one to give that to her, to make her fall apart like that. It had been my name falling from her lips as she came, and it would only ever be my name for the rest of our days. Because she was mine. My Leakin agreed, nodding his head dazedly in my mind as I finally drifted off to sleep.